Tonight we're going to be doing some very important topics, which in reality each one deserves an evening in itself, and that's why it took me a little while to get here. I just couldn't manage to get into all the details, and so I don't intend to get too deeply involved in every area. Just going to give you an overview because there's quite a few halachot, but they're nevertheless important. Before I begin, I did leave out something important last week when we spoke about milk, the various types of milk, the concerns that exist with milk, mixing of non-kosher milk, which may happen occasionally. And we spoke briefly also about the mother's milk. And we said mother's milk is okay for human consumption. There's nothing wrong with it. Not only for babies, but even for adults, if there was a need for it. However, the rabbis do tell us and remind us that if for some reason a mother cannot nurse her baby, and that child needs to nurse from another mother, make sure that that woman is healthy, she's not sick, because the diseases can be transmitted through the milk, and especially be careful not to use a non-Jewish woman to provide that milk. I remember I once read that President Theodore Roosevelt, president number 26 in this country, in the early part of the century, he nursed from a woman who was not a very healthy woman, and when he became older, he suffered, his vision, his eyesight was very poor, and the doctor said that it was probably due to the fact that he nursed from a woman who was very sick. So even though it's true that if a child needs to nurse from a non-Jewish woman, Jewish child, he can, pikuach nefesh, he needs to survive, even though we have Similac today and formula of all types, nevertheless, mother's milk is always better. It is very important that he not drink the milk from a non-Jewish woman because everything is transmitted through the milk, which means that the child could somehow be affected by the milk that's coming from, I don't want to call it an unclean vessel, but from a source which is not 100% pure. So that's just good advice. We will see how that also affects and how that applies to some of the items that we will be talking about tonight. The first one is bishul akum. We've spoken all this in the past few weeks about what is considered kosher, how to determine if something is kosher or not. We still have a couple more weeks to go when we speak about the various ingredients in the supermarket. But let's say you already have everything that's kosher in your household. There's still a way that you can ruin it. There's still a way that you can render that food, that dish, non-kosher. And that is by allowing a non-Jew to prepare it for you, to cook it for you. That's called bishul akum. In the jargon of the halakha, that which is being cooked by a akum, a goy, a non-Jew. This is already a rabbinic prohibition. It's not a biblical prohibition. The food is completely kasher. There's no problem with it. But there is a rabbinical prohibition. They've made various decrees, many takanot and gzerot. And one of them is that a goy should not cook for a Jew. What are the concerns? The issues of concern is, number one, and we will see that number one also applies to some of the other problems, and that is that the rabbis were concerned that a Jew should not get too close to a non-Jew. If they get too close, if there's too much close contact, they eventually may want to marry each other. And of course that is asur in the Torah, to marry a non-Jew. So in order to avoid that close contact, they said, do not allow a goy to cook for you. Because believe it or not, cooking brings people close. Come for dinner, whether it's Thanksgiving dinner or whether it's some other dinner, why don't you come and I'm going to serve kosher turkey, the goy tells you. But the fact that you're eating from his food, zemekarev talevavot, that brings the hearts close, and that creates a relationship of sorts, a close relationship, which eventually could lead to hatnut. Hatnut meaning to marriage between a goy and a Jew. So the rabbi said, you know what, let's maintain a distance for safety reasons. The second reason of why the rabbi said a goy should not cook for a Jew is because Shema Yachilenu Davar Asur. He might feed you, he might give you, he might mix in the food a non-kosher ingredient. And if you're not around, how do you know? You can't ask him. He may not tell you the truth. You can't rely on him. So that these are the issues of concern when it comes to a goy cooking for a Jew. But the rabbis said that this does not apply to all foods. So in order for us to understand this area, an important area, which affects us not only at home, because you may not have a maid, so you think you don't have this problem, but we all eat from time to time in restaurants. We all go from time to time to a banquet, to a wedding. And who do you think is the cook? A non-Jew most of the time. So we need to know how to relate to this and how to go about it. what we should be concerned about. So this does happen to every one of us, one way or another, at home or outside the home. So the rabbis tell us in order for something to be prohibited for a goy to cook, it has to meet two conditions. It has to be davar she'oleh al shulchan melachim. I wrote here eno oleh because I'm referring to those which are mutar. But for something to become asur, it has to meet these two conditions. Oleh al shulchan melachim. It is fit to be at a king's table. It's not just beans. It's something which is fit to put at a king's table. You would invite a friend over your home and serve him this. In other words, this would be something special. Not just mashed potatoes or beans or the like. Meat is a typical example. It's fit to be served on a king's table. But customs change. Places, different countries have different foods. So it all depends of course, on the geographical location of where you are. Certain foods in certain locations may be in that particular place fit for a king's table and somewhere else not. So of course we're talking about wherever you are, that it must at that place be fit la'alot al shulchan melachim, not just any little food item. And I'm going to give you a few examples. The second condition is eno ne'echal hay. You would not be able to eat it raw. Cucumbers. You could eat a cucumber raw. Almost many vegetables you can eat them raw. You don't have to cook them. So if a goy made the soup, a vegetable soup, it wouldn't be a problem. Does not meet the second condition at least. It may not meet either of the conditions. But it for sure does not meet the second condition of ne'echal hay. Because you could eat many of those vegetables at least, so long as it's the majority, so raw, then it would be okay. So that is why a cup of coffee would not be a problem. How could you allow yourself to have a cup of coffee on the plane? Maybe it's bishul akum. They cooked it for you. They brewed it for you. Because water is insignificant. Water you can drink whether it's cooked or not cooked, right? And a little bit of cocoa or coffee is also insignificant. It's just a flavor, right? It's not a real food item. She'oleh al shulchan melachim that you have to be concerned with, right? So there are certain things, no big deal. You can have a goy make them for you, but it is the other foods that we are concerned about that there may be a problem with. So what do we do in a home where one has a maid? Some are of the opinion that maids should be completely mutar. Why? Because there's never a concern or a worry that you're going to marry your maid. Unless she's a very, maybe good-looking person. I don't know. Right? That may happen too. But ordinarily, the reason why some opinions hold that that's not such a big problem is because a shifcha, a servant, is, especially in those days, was in a lower class, like lower status. You would not think about it. You would not think about it. They were subservient. You were employees. You would not relate to them like that. There would be no concern that she would invite you and ask you, maybe your daughter or your son should marry my daughter or my son, right? You wouldn't think of that. You wouldn't want that. So some say that with maids it's a little bit more lenient. So under certain circumstances, if some problem arises, we take that in consideration. But we follow the stricter opinion that regardless of who the individual is, a non-Jew is a non-Jew, and we're concerned about close contact, and we don't allow them to cook. But there's a difference between Sfaradim and Ashkenazim. Everybody agrees that these are the two conditions for the food to have or to meet, and if it does not meet them, then he could prepare it for you. Everybody agrees on that. The difference between Ashkenazim and Sfaradim is how could we avoid the problem, other than just not allowing them to mess with the stove or with the oven? Is there any way that we can allow them to cook, nevertheless avoid the problem of bishul akum? The answer is yes. As long as you make some sort of a heker, as long as you get involved. If the Jew is involved in the cooking, then the cooking was not done completely by the non-Jew, then it removes a little bit of the problem that would have existed. So the question is, how much of involvement is required? That's the difference between Sfaradim and Ashkenazim. Sfaradim are stricter. They require a bit more involvement. The Jew actually has to put the pot on top of the flame, and not just put the pot and go away, and later the goy comes to light the flame. No, the goy lit the flame, the Jew has to go ahead and put the pot on the fire. Or steer it and be involved in the actual cooking, but not just lighting the flame. That would not be enough. For Ashkenazim, it's enough for the Jew to light a flame. And the most lenient opinion of all, which many Ashkenazim follow today, is that a pilot light is sufficient. As long as you lit the original pilot light, the goy can cook from that point on. So Ashkenazim are very lenient with just lighting the fire. doing something which should be a heker. After all, this is a rabbinical decree. They say all you need is a heker. Heker means something to recognize that obviously we want distance, so I have to do something. I don't have to do a lot, as long as I did something. But the Bet Yosef said, no, we have to do a little bit more. It's not just enough to light the fire, you have to be a lot more involved. That is why, for Sephardim, you actually have to put the pot on the fire, or be involved much more in the cooking process. If this is not done, the food becomes asur. Just like any taref, any food that's taref, yes. I'll talk about that soon. Okay, so the food becomes taref. And some say that not only does the food become taref, even the pots and pans require haga'ala. They need to be made kosher again. Some say you don't need to do that, but at least the food cannot be eaten. And it could become a problem sometimes. So one has to be concerned about this, especially with foods that everybody would agree that oleh al shulchan melachim and that eno echal chai. So vegetables you shouldn't have a problem with, fruits no problem, but main dishes could be a problem. And there's also a question about factories. We buy stuff in supermarkets, right? They could pose a problem of bishul too. For example, some vegetables have been cooked already. People buy them, canned goods, or even frozen goods, but they've been processed. But if they're vegetables, it's less of a problem. Or it could be fish, but the fish, they don't actually cook fish. Sometimes what they do is they just use steam, the vapor, or the smoking process. That's not really called cooking, so it may be permissible. It's a low-level type of cooking. But if it would be real cooking, let's say French fries. Have you seen them? You can buy it ready. French fries. Some say that if it's completely ready, it would be a problem. So this is an issue that one has to look out for when he's buying something. Was this food item cooked or not? Even if it's 100% kosher, the ingredients are kosher, it might be bishul akum. So regardless of who prepared it, whether it was a factory or the made at home, it may be a problem. So a lot of women do not allow their maids to come close to the kitchen. Don't get involved, don't touch any pot and pan. But also for the second reason, that is sometimes if you get them used to cooking, even if you're involved, they may, when you're not there, when you're not looking, put something which is not kosher. So that problem will always exist unless you trust her, unless she knows she cannot bring her own food to the kitchen, unless she knows that you cannot mix milk and meat. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in the kitchen when somebody does not know the halachot. And a goy usually does not know the halachot, unless this maid was previously in the house of a rabbi, or somebody very religious, where she saw everything, and the house, and the woman, the rabbi's wife, trained her very well. Many times they know more, than the women, because they've seen it, they've observed it, they know what the problems are. So the best thing to do is to somehow get involved. If your maid helps you, for the Sephardim, be involved and do not let them do everything when it comes to putting the food on the flame. Yes? No, they don't have to light it. Right. That's more important than lighting it. Lighting it would not be sufficient. They would have to put the pot on the flame. Unless they lit it afterwards, perhaps. That would be better. But not to just light and go away. Yeah. So it's always better to put the pot on the flame already, which is already lit. Not just to put it there and just go away either. Yeah. As long as it was lit there before the housewife put it on top of the flame, that's fine. That shows involvement. The main thing is we want to show involvement. So what do we do with restaurants, or like your question? You're invited somewhere. You're invited you're eating out in a restaurant. You are eating at a banquet, at a wedding. What should you do? You're a Sephardi. For Ashkenazim, usually it's not a problem, right? It's easy. You just light. The Mashiach comes and lights, right? The oven, the stove, whatever. There are rabbis who hold that when it comes to establishments like restaurants and banquets, that it's okay for the Sephardi to rely on the Ashkenazi method of allowing the food, because there are various other leniencies that I did not discuss, right? Well, one of them we did mention, that is the fact that we talk about maids or servants, that hashash, that problem might not exist. So it could be that in these situations, if you have no other place and you're invited, you need to go, then you could rely on that method of allowing the food to be cooked by a goy. As long as the mashgiach lit the flame, that's fine. But this has to be looked into. This has to be checked out. Because if this was not done at all, and you're having all sorts of good food, you cannot eat from that food. So if you go to some party or something where there's waiters who are doing all the cooking and there's no mashgiach, you just can't eat all these foods unless it's a food that does not meet one of those two conditions. Vegetables, fruits, things that they cook, that lo ala al shulchan melachim, or that they can be eaten raw, then it would be okay. But otherwise, if there's no mashgiach that lit the flame, it would be a problem. It would be called bishul akum, and it's a surah. Yeah. A good supervision would, of course, not give a supervision on something that is bishul akum. So this would only be in a situation where you don't have a supervision or a good supervision, that you would need to be concerned about it. Otherwise, they wouldn't give their hashgacha on this, right? And there are not that many food items in the supermarkets that are bishul, that are cooked. Yeah, unless it's like cooked beans. You could have, there are some canned items that are being cooked, but then there's other problems with the ingredients could be a problem. I'm going to get, bread is something, it's a whole different, bread is the next one we're going to be talking about. That's something by itself. Alright, so bishul akum is an important area, and if you have a maid, you have to be aware of this. The next one is bread. Bread is different. The reason bread is different is because bread is called a staple food. Everybody eats it. Everybody needs it. You can't survive without bread. So the rabbis made an exemption or an exclusion. Shelechem ze yotze min haklal. It is a little bit different. We're going to be more lenient with bread. What are we going to do with bread? With bread, we're going to allow pat palter, but not pat nachtom. We're going to allow the bread of a non-Jewish baker as long as he's selling it from his business and not from his home. We cannot buy non-Jewish bread from a non-Jew's home directly, because then we're back to square one. Come over, have coffee. The next day, he's offering you his daughter for your son, right? The same idea, but because bread is so important, rabbis made it a little bit more lenient and said that if he's commercial, he has a bakery, you can buy it under certain conditions. And what are the conditions? There is no Jewish bread or Jewish bakery in the area. Or, there is a Jewish bakery, but the guy doesn't make baguettes, and you want the French baguette, and only he makes it. And you've determined, of course, that the ingredients are 100% kosher, right? As long as you determine that the ingredients are 100% kosher, and I'll tell you what the problem could be in bread in a moment, then it's okay. So you have basically these two conditions. Either there's no Jewish bread, no Jewish bakery, or there is, but they don't make the bread that you like. So therefore, you just can't buy any bagels in Ralph's, even if it has an OU. Aren't you surprised? It has an OU, but it's not Pat Israel. And many people would not eat it. They don't want it in their home. A lot of people are machmir on Pat Israel. Just like on bishul akum, the bread has to be Pat Israel. So why did they put an OU on it? What means? Pat Israel. Bread that was made by a Jew. Jewish bread. He baked it. Or, even if he did not bake it, he lit the oven, or he increased the flame, or he threw some wood into the oven. He contributed to the baking. If you contribute to the baking, then it becomes Pat Israel. Just like with the bishul akum. You're involved, the problem is solved. But let's say you were not involved, and you want to buy some bagels in Ralph's, and you check the ingredients, and it says OU, that means the OU gave a supervision, that means it's perfectly kosher. Should you buy it? Can you buy it or not? Only if you like these bagels. Not when it comes to bread. With bread, remember, bread, we have bishul akum, right? We just spoke about bishul akum. The same applies to bread. You cannot just allow a goy to make bread for you. I just said that bread, because it's so important, the rabbis made an exemption. They said, you can be more lenient with bread than you are with regular food. So even you were not involved in the bread. You go to a non-Jewish bakery, and you know that the ingredients are 100% kosher, right? You can buy their bread. But it's bishul akum. The goy made it, he baked it. Bread, because it's so important and we so much depend on it, the rabbis were more lenient. And they said, if you have no other Jewish bakery in the area, in the vicinity, you have one 25 miles away, well, that's not the vicinity, right? You don't have Jewish bread or Jewish bakery in the vicinity, or there is one, but they don't make this bread that you like. The Armenians are very good at making bread. They have special breads, long breads, very tasty breads. You won't find them in any Jewish bakery. And if you grew up in Iran the Armenians sold those breads over there. Yeah, remember? Those, yeah, and they're Armenian. And if you go to a Jewish bakery, you won't find them. Can you eat them? If you love them, you really like them, and you can't find anything, it's mutar. It's okay, as long as you know it's kosher ingredients. Now, what problem could there be in bread? What could they put in bread? Not necessarily in the bread itself. They may not put anything. All it is water and flour and yeast on the pan. On the pan, in many places, they smear it with lard. Many places. Shuman chazir. What? Well, you have to determine that. That is where you have hashgacha, an O-U, a K. No, then you can't eat it. If there's no hashgacha, how do you know? You don't know anything. I know, I'm talking about after you've determined that the bread is kosher, the ingredients are kosher. It has an O-U, it has an OK, it has a good supervision. So we're not concerned about the ingredients anymore. Now we're only concerned about bishul akum. We're concerned about the goy cooking or baking something for us. But the rabbis decreed that they should not, that they were more lenient with bread. You follow? That's our only concern here. The bread is kosher.
Rabbi, if you say if there's no OU, pretend there is no OU.
Then you can't eat it.
Pretend it's like La Brea Bakery.
If the bread was,
It's La Brea Bakery bread.
no, if the bread does not have a supervision, then you don't know if it's kosher. How are you going to know if it's kosher or not? Then what's the question?
That's the person of La Brea Bakery bread was made by Kosher Rabbi before the
Before it became? So what's the question?
There was more to it, and a lot of rabbis went and said, okay.
Then they checked it out. If somebody has to check it out. Why not? Then they cannot eat it. Then you can't eat it. How do you know what they put? Maybe they put lard on the tavnit, right? I don't know. I'm not following you.
Before you were saying that if you want to eat the bread that's baked by a non-Jew, then you have to just say first the ingredients are okay. You sounded like you're going to be the one that eats the kosher, even though it doesn't have a stuff.
There are two issues in buying bread. In bread, and that is, it was baked by a non-Jew. That's a problem. It's just like bishul akum. All right. How do we resolve that? We resolve that with the leniency. The Chachamim said that if there is no Jewish bakery in the area, there's no Jewish bread to be found, or there is, but there isn't this particular type, you can have it. You don't have the problem of bishul akum. We give you this leniency. We give you permission to have a goy bake for you bread, even though we didn't give you that permission with certain foods. With bread, we give you that permission. No, one second. I'm talking about now the issue of bishul akum. Let's not mix the two. We give you the permission that you don't have to be concerned about the problem of bishul akum when it comes to bread. Bread is so important. We tell you that if there's no other bread, Jewish bread in town, no Jewish bakery, you can have that. But just make sure before you put it in your mouth that you know that the goy did not put any lard or anything inside of it that is tarif. Make sure. Send your rabbis, send the OU, send the organization to check out the ingredients.
But does it have to have
Yes.
If it does not have a hefsher, then you have to find out somehow. You have to go there and inspect, right? Maybe they put some preservative, maybe they put something on the pan. Maybe in the same oven they bake something which is not kosher at the same time they did. So if there is no hefsher, you cannot have it unless you or a rabbi inspected the premises. You went there, you saw how they make it, you sat down, they gave you a tour, so you became your own mashgiach as long as you're knowledgeable. As long as you're knowledgeable with the issues, and that is what happens with tortillas. Tortillas don't have a hechsher, the corn tortillas, but you can have it because you can read the ingredients. It's been checked out by people who are familiar with the process, and there's no problem with it. Flour tortillas have lard many times. Okay? Flour tortillas many times have lard. Only the corn tortillas are fine. So there are very few products in the market that you can have blindly without an hashgacha. 100% pure orange juice, not from concentrate. What could be wrong with that? Unless the same machines that process orange juice process something which is not kosher. But that's very rare, right? Because the orange juice is cold anyway. So even if there was something there, it's cold, right?
What if they're not the advertising the vegetarian?
Makes no difference.
That means they wouldn't use lard or...
Right, but they may use other preservatives and other ingredients. Right. Right. Right, as long as you're knowledgeable with the ingredients. If they tell you we put something called red 40 to brighten it, to make it very red. You say, what's red 40? So you would need to ask the chemist, what do you make it with? Where does it come from? And he'll tell you it's a chemical. It's not a natural ingredient. It does not come, it's not derived from any animals. Oh, okay, that's fine. Right? If he's going to tell you he puts monosterides about the various ingredients that could be suspicious. They could be from various sources, either chemical or natural. So if you're knowledgeable, or it's very straightforward and very simple, bread, water, yeast, a little bit of salt, right? Maybe some baking soda, I don't know, right? Right, so then what would be the problem? The only problem could be either in the tavnit, where they bake it, did they smear something? Or if at the same time that they're baking this bread, they bake something else which is not kosher. But if you've determined that to your satisfaction, or you see an OU, then there's no problem with the ingredients. So we have that leniency on bread. But you can only use this leniency if there is no other bread, there's no Jewish bakery, or this is your favorite bread, you can't get it anywhere else. Otherwise, you just can't buy non-Jewish bread, even if it has an OU. Because all the OU is telling you, we've checked it out for you. And if you're stuck in Wichita, Kansas, and you have nothing else to eat, you have no other bread, you can have this bread perfectly fine, no problem. The rabbis tell us that anybody who eats pat palter, non-Jewish bread, should be careful during Aseret Yemei Teshuvah at least, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the 10 days, not to have pat palter. Because during those 10 days, which are very, very sensitive days, when we're doing Teshuvah, we want to be completely clean, even from something like this, which we rely on the leniency to allow us to eat from it. Yes? It is. But only if I have no Jewish bakery in the area. I'm in Wichita, Kansas. I don't think there's a Jewish bakery there. And I want to eat bread. I'm stuck there for Shabbat. I want to have chalot. Or I want a sandwich. Could I eat the bread? It was baked by a non-Jew. The answer is yes, if it has an OU, if the ingredients are kosher. If I'm in Los Angeles and I go to Ralph's supermarket and I see some bagels, no. The answer is no. It has an OU, but you have them down the block. Buy those bagels in the bakery. So some people, of course, do not know this, and they just say, well, it has an OU, it's perfectly fine. That's true. But it was only meant in the case where you have no bagels, or Jewish bagels. Otherwise, why are you buying this non-Jewish bread? If you have none, or if you really like this, they don't make this kind at your favorite bakery. Then go ahead and buy it, no problem whatsoever. No, not whatsoever. The rabbis made it more lenient, but with certain restrictions. Only when you have no choice. But it doesn't mean that we permit it altogether. You still have the issue of hatnut. The rabbis did not want close contact between the two. Because they did not want the Jew and the non-Jew to have close contact, and baking or cooking brings that about. They said you have to be either involved in the baking or the cooking, or as in the case of bread, you have no other Jewish bakery, Jewish bread, so you can therefore buy this one. All right, let's quickly go over to the next category, tolaim. We said fruits and vegetables is not a problem in bishul akum, right? Because you can eat them raw. Well, so what problem can you have with fruits and vegetables? Big trouble. Much more trouble, believe it or not, than with bread or with your non-Jewish maid cooking for you. Because all of that is by rabbinic decree. Whereas by fruits and vegetables, you could have non-kosher fruits and vegetables. What? Non-kosher fruits and vegetables? Yes, because they have tolaim. They have bugs or insects or aphids, all sorts. And this is a big problem, especially in humid areas, like the East Coast, like in parts of Eretz Israel, where many vegetables especially are infested. Some are so infested they're simply not eaten. Even if you could wash them, they're too difficult to wash. Now this is a very, very important area, because a person who eats certain insects, he may be transgressing 4, 5, or 6 transgressions at a time. Because the Torah gave various transgressions for the shkatzim uremasim, that are prohibited. Why so much? Because this metamtem tasechel, this causes a tremendous timtum to the mind. In other words, it's a blockage. Even though all nevelot and trefot do the same thing, all non-kosher food affects the mind spiritually, the mind. Like we said about like we said about non-Jewish milk from a non-Jewish woman. Same thing with these. One has to be very careful with this because they can affect him. Even though they're small, makes no difference. Remember we spoke about birya, a creature? We have the additional issue of a birya, even if it's very, very small, like an ant. It's still a sheket, even if it's small, and one will be transgressing that lav, even though it's that small, because it's complete. I mean, if it would be just small pieces, then you would have to have a kazait. You would have to have a whole shi'or, a certain amount to transgress, or to receive lashes, in the time when they gave lashes. But if it's an entire intact birya, then you have, even if it's small, it would be asur to eat. So what do we do with tola'im? This is a big area, and it's very technical, and I'm only going to say a little bit about it. First of all, believe it or not, it makes a difference how the tola'at, or how the worm or the bug came to be where they are. There is bacteria, there is all sorts of bugs that grow in the food, right? When something becomes infested, it could be from a bacteria inside the food, not that the bugs came from outside and landed on the leaf. The rabbis distinguish between a worm that was in an apple while the apple was still growing in a tree, or once the worm came into the apple after the apple was detached from the tree. Believe it or not, it makes a difference because so long as the apple is attached, any type of worm, no matter where you find it, is prohibited. Whereas if the fruit is detached, it would make a difference if it crawled out of the fruit or not. If you found it inside, it may not be a problem. As long as you did not find it around the seed area, or as long as the worm did not come out. Most people, when they open up their apple, they're not going to care where they found the worm, right? But there are distinctions, or whether something would be asur or mutar, whether you have to be concerned about it, whether you have to further check. I mean, an apple is very easy. You can see it. But there are certain food items, which I'm going to list to you, that may be very difficult to detect. So there are differences in the halakha, but they're not important for us to know right now. As far as worms are concerned, where you find them, whether the fruit was attached or detached. What's important to know is that there are certain vegetables, not fruit, vegetables, that are regularly found to have all sorts of bugs on them. Those are the ones that pose the biggest problem. Because the rule of tola'im or of remasim and shkatzim is, if you can see it with the naked eye, it's asur. If you need a powerful magnifying glass, then it's mutar. Obviously, rabbis didn't expect everybody to carry his magnifying glass wherever he goes and to check everything. But some people do that, by the way. But that's only hasidut. You don't have to do that. The halakha says if you can see it with your naked eye, then you have to remove it. You can't eat it. Even if what you see is only a black dot. And when you see a black dot on certain vegetables, the siman that there could have been something there, or there is something there, but you can't see it. Take a magnifying glass, and believe it or not, that black dot becomes legs and feet and wings all of a sudden. So why can't you have it? Because you already were able to identify it as a black dot. See, the problem is a lot of the bugs are camouflaged. Yeah, they're the same color, so you have to look at it in sunlight. Okay, so I'm going to explain. There's several organizations and rabbis that specialize in this, and they've compiled lists of various types of vegetables that are reputed to have problems, and how the best way to go about it, how to clean it. So I'm going to go quickly over some of them. There are what we call the leafy vegetables that require leaf-by-leaf inspection, some of them, especially in areas where they tend to have problems. Remember, in the West Coast here, we have less problems than in the East Coast. So a lot of what I'm saying right now does not necessarily apply here. But once you've determined, you've seen it once, that a particular vegetable has problems, then you always have to check it. Cabbage, endives, iceberg lettuce, kale, red cabbage, romaine lettuce, these are types of leafy vegetables that require leaf-by-leaf inspection. We are more familiar with the romaine lettuce when it comes to Pesach for the Seder, that we check each one. These have bugs. They need to be checked. What's the best way to remove the bugs on the leafy vegetables? So they give us the following guidelines. First, separate the leaves, soak them in water, make a complete leaf-by-leaf inspection, wash off any insects, and then you can use it. Some put a little bit of salt on the romaine lettuce. Oh, very good point. How could a restaurant, a good question, that uses large amounts of vegetables, how could they get away with it? That is why you have a mashgiach. One second. That is why you have a mashgiach. That is why you have a supervisor, mashgiach midi, who's there, and part of his job and function is to check these things or to help out in this. Now, remember, I just said something important. This is not a problem all over the world. In some areas more than in others. In Israel, because it's a big problem, a lot of places do not have the vegetables that have problems because of that. Unless you buy them, they have certain types that they bought that grew on sand. I forget what it's called. That are bug-free. Yeah, because a lot of the sprays they use, in Gush Katif, a lot of the sprays that they use to spray does not help. Always, there's always bugs inside hiding, or the bugs come later after the vegetables were picked and attach themselves to the leaves. So it's a problem. Then you have leaves or leafy vegetables that have a hazakah. In other words, that you know for sure. It is known that these things will always have bugs. You have to throw out the outer leaves, separate the leaves of 3 heads of the vegetable, do not wash the leaves, check the 3 heads leaf by leaf. If one bug is found in the test heads, the ones that were removed, then all the produce must be checked leaf by leaf. However, if no bugs are found in the outer ones, the ones that we are checking, the rest of the shipment does not require checking. So that's how, in some cases, it is done. So it all depends on what the vegetable is, what the geographical location is, and what is known about it. I'll give you an example. There are some vegetables that cannot be checked so easily and have a big problem. And if you see it in front of you, don't eat it maybe. Artichoke, hearts. They are traditionally one of the most infested vegetables of all that you can imagine. And it's so difficult to find because you know what it looks like. You would have to cut. If you want to really eat it, you'd have to take it apart completely. Wash it and inspect it. And unless you know for a fact by the rabbis who have checked it out that in a particular geographical location it does not have that problem, then if it's served to you, you can be assured that you're eating bugs. Yeah.
Eating them leaf by leaf.
What is that? I'm talking about the whole thing intact. If you took it apart, it would be different. I'm talking about artichoke, hearts. Brussels sprouts can also be a big problem in certain areas. They have a lot of little bugs inside. These two are big troublemakers.
If you cook them, then leaf by leaf before you put it into your house, right?
What?
After the cook?
You can't eat dead bugs either. Right?
Checking the leaf after the artichoke is being cooked.
Right?
Before you put it into your house.
And you separate it after it's cooked.
You may not be able to recognize it after it's cooked. It's all smashed up. It's all, it's almost gone. What you have, you do have certain leaves that if you dry them and you keep them for a year, anything that was there is completely gone. After 12 months, it's completely disappears. Whatever was there, and it would be fine. You would still have to soak it in water to see if anything was left over. But even if it was there, it's gone. But most things you can't leave for that long. If you use high pressure water to rinse it out, you check it very well, leaf by leaf, then many times you may be able to detect. Some things you have to bang on the table. Which ones do you have to bang on the table? Cilantro, dill, mint leaves, and parsley. They recommend to beat them on the table and to check the table if there was anything that, after beating, if anything fell off. Those that are floreted vegetables, like fresh broccoli and cauliflower, and they have problems too in many places, especially the humid places. Wash the florets thoroughly under a strong stream of water. Agitate the florets in a white bowl. Then examine the water to see if it's insect-free. When you inspect the romaine lettuce, you put I take all of them, a whole bunch of them, and put them into a kara, into like a container. Put water, a little bit of salt.
Vinegar.
Yeah. After I remove them, and of course then I wash them out again, I can see in the water that remain a few bugs floating. So that is how we know that for sure certain vegetables always have problems. But we're luckier than the East Coast. Here there's less problem than there. But you still have to check. So this, in a kosher kitchen, these things have to be done regularly. And the ones that have more problems than others, they for sure have to be done. Because we expect to find bugs. Now, in restaurants, in other establishments, it is our hope that they did their job right. But otherwise, you don't know. If you have a good mashgiach, hopefully they've done the job right. Yes? No. The last category of vegetables that only require washing, they list over here alfalfa sprouts, beans, beets, carrots, celery stalks, leek, mushrooms, radishes, squash, zucchini, turnips. These usually don't have a problem. Just wash them off, and it's fine. You don't have to actually check for the aphids because there will not be any aphids in them. They don't have the little places where they can hide. Yeah. So depending on which vegetable you're dealing with and the geographical location, which is very important, if you are told in a particular area these are known to have problems, you have to follow the procedure on how to inspect them. And once you're satisfied that the outer leaves don't have it, or that a certain amount of the shipment does not have it, you can assume maybe that the rest do not have it. But if you found it on one or on two, then you have to check each one of them. So it's not easy, but that's part of a kosher kitchen. Where is this a big problem? You're buying falafel, you're going to have some hummus. Hummus needs to be checked because there are certain food items out there that are not fruits and vegetables that will have worms, tolaim, like hummus. Hummus is a big one. There's other things too that they need to be checked. Flour needs to be checked. From time to time, you have infested flour. All of this is part of a kosher kitchen, making sure that you are eating bug-free food. Okay, I don't know if there's a need to get into more details, but this is an important area, the area of tolaim, of bugs and aphids. You have to watch the food you eat. Some dried fruits like figs sometimes have problems, pistachios. And if you suspect, you see the eggs of the bugs, you see something, throw it away. Some things it doesn't just pay to mess around with it. It's too small or too difficult to check. All right. The next topic is yain nesech and stam yainam. The rabbis prohibited wine. You can't just go to a liquor store and buy yourself a bottle of wine. What's wrong with wine? All it is grape juice, right? What is wine? The juice of a grape. What's wrong with that? So there's two types of wine. We have yain nesech and stam yainam. The one that is prohibited by the Torah is called yain nesech. What's nesech? Shayu menaschim oto la'avodah zarah. That the goyim would bring it on the altar for their idols. What? The goyim, the non-Jewish world, in the past and even today, would bring it as part of their ritual. They would bring wine and pour it for their avodah zarah, for their idol worshipping. So something that was brought or dedicated for avodah zarah is asur. Not only is it asur b'shtiyah, it's also asur b'hana'ah. You can't even sell it. It's prohibited. Today, however, most of the wine is not made for that purpose, for avodah zarah. It's called stam yainam. Stam means I don't know. I just know it was made by a goy. Or, even if it was not made by a goy, if a goy touched it or moved it around in your house or anywhere, and it was open, and it was an open bottle and not sealed, you cannot drink it. So not only can't we buy the wine from the non-Jew, not only can't we have benefits from it under certain circumstances, even if it's our wine, it's kosher wine 100%, made by a Jew, but under the right conditions, the goy moved it, right? Or he picked it up and shook it, and it was open, it was not in a box or anything, it was not sealed, he just made your wine not kosher. You cannot drink it. So if you have maids at home, and you have kosher wine, well guess what? You can't, be careful not to touch it. Unless it's yain nevushal. Unless it's been pasteurized or cooked to a certain temperature, that kind of wine cannot be made yain stam yainam or yain nesech, because that will never be brought for idols. Cooked is not fit. But there are two reasons why we can't have the wine. Because today we don't have yain for avodah zarah. So why can't we have the wine? Also because of the intermarriage problem. Wine also brings people close. It makes people drunk, and it makes people do all sorts of things. So rabbis do not allow the wine to be purchased from a goy today. Or, if it was Jewish wine and they touched it and it was not sealed, or they moved it around, it would still pose a problem, even if it was a young boy who did it. However, there's a difference whether the goy was a Christian or whether he was a Muslim. How do you like that? According to the Sephardim especially, if it was a Muslim, it's not asur behana. It will for sure not be a problem to benefit from this. Muslim doesn't believe in idols. You can't drink it because you still have the problem of intermarriage. But you can benefit from it. Okay, you sell it. You can't use it. If it's a Christian, that's not true. You would not be able to benefit it unless it's a big loss. The Ashkenazim hold that most Christians today are not true of the Avodah Zarah. All they're doing today is minhag avotehem biyadam. All they're doing is following the traditions of the past. All the rituals they have, all the things they do, it's not real Avodah Zarah. So therefore, you couldn't drink it, but it would not be prohibited behana, depending on the circumstances. Regardless of whatever happens, you have to be careful with your wine. And you can't buy it. Even if it's 100% kosher, the ingredients are perfectly fine. You know where this is important? Brandy. Brandy is not wine, but it has wine, it contains wine. So you can't buy brandy. But schnapps, kalua, Irish cream, all these things, as long as you know that they don't put any non-kosher ingredients, as long as you know, you've checked out the ingredients, I can't tell you about every single liquor, but as long as you've checked it out, as long as it's fine, then it's okay. There's no wine. But that is why you have to look out for ingredients like grape juice when you're buying cranberry juice. There are certain juices that they mix grape juice. Grape juice would be like wine, right?
Tequila also with the worms.
Yeah, there's tequila with worms. So that's as soon as you see it, you move away. You don't look at it. Yes.
What's very good is like the wine and grape juice in green bottles, green glass bottles.
I don't know about that. Yeah. Yes.
But actually, you could serve kosher wine to a non-Jew, and you could sit at a table with him, and you could give kosher wine to the non-Jew, as long as you're pouring it and serving it to him in a glass. He could drink with you kosher wine.
Yeah, but that should not be allowed. That should not be done for another reason that I'm going to speak about the moment with beer. Yeah, but there's no isur, right? There's no isur. Yeah, but if you were to pour you, that would be a bigger problem. Not only would it be a problem for whatever was poured, but whatever even remained in the bottle becomes asur. If the bottles are opened up and they handle it in a certain way, it becomes asur. So a lot of people are careful to buy only yain mevushal if they have maids at home, so they shouldn't have this problem. The problem with yain mevushal is that some people don't like to use it for kiddush because it's already cooked, so it already has lost some of its strength.
In restaurants, Rabbi, even kosher restaurants, a non-Jewish waiter, a non-Jewish waitress, the wine is always mevushal.
Yes, in establishments where they have a good hashgacha, the yain is usually mevushal, sure, otherwise they wouldn't be able to serve you the wine. Okay, so this is an area to be aware of. The last area, I don't know if we have that much time, but let me see if we can cover one more area. We spoke about machalot asurot, that there are certain foods that you cannot eat. Can you do business with it? Can you have a store that sells non-kosher food? The answer is no. You cannot do business with non-kosher food either. What's the problem? There are various problems. First of all, you maybe end up selling it to a Jew. That's lifnei iver lo titen michshol. You're selling something to a Jew, unless you warn him, perhaps. Even so, you never know. It may eventually land at a Jew's table. But the other issue is the rabbis were concerned if you're always handling non-kosher food, you may come to taste it. You may come to try it out. Because you're dealing with it all the time. The only things that you're allowed to sell are animals that are not for human consumption. You're a horse dealer. You sell horses. Not for horse meat, for riding. You sell birds. You sell cockatoos, they're called? Huh? Parakeets? Yeah? Parrots? Nobody's going to buy them to eat. You can have a business of that. That's no problem. But you can't sell seafood. You can't sell anything which is not kosher. Not only that, even if it's small amounts, small ingredients, non-kosher food, not necessarily lobster, but non-kosher ingredients, you cannot sell in your store for similar reasons. However, let's say you have a cat or a dog, and you want to buy dog food and cat food. Well, that's not such a big deal. That you can't do, because we're not concerned that you're going to come to eat that, unless maybe you're very hungry, right? Most people will not eat the dog food or the cat food. So if you have to buy dog food or cat food that is not kosher, it's fine. And you know where this applies? If you have a fish pond, and usually the food that you buy for your fish is chametz, what are you going to do, Pesach? So my father buys frozen shrimp. You buy this frozen shrimp for fish, just make sure you don't mix it with the rest of your food. But it's for the fish. It's made specifically for the fish, for the goldfish, and you can feed it. So if it's for your animals, for your pets, you can buy these foods. Otherwise, you can't do business with non-kosher food. Yes. Oh, that's my next point. Thank you for reminding me. However, you're a fisherman, and you occasionally catch a shark. That you could sell, because you're not in the business of regularly selling non-kosher food, but you occasionally caught something. It's permissible. It's a very good question, very good point. Yeah.
You also not allowed to own stock yourself.
You should not be a partner, a direct partner in a non-kosher enterprise. In other words, like McDonald's, exactly.
Don't share the power.
Exactly, right, yeah.
You're a guy who sells cigarettes and making a profit.
Cigarettes? That's dangerous to your health.
Somebody skip beer.
Yeah, beer. I'm getting to that. Beer. What's the problem with beer? It's kosher. It's 100% okay. You can buy beer as much as you want. Not on Pesach. It's chametz. The problem is, the rabbi said, don't have it at a bar. Don't drink beer regularly at a non-Jewish bar. Because association. Occasionally, you're in the middle of the road and you want a cold beer, you can go ahead and buy it there. Right? But not for a Jew to regularly go to bars and sit and have the beer. Because you're associating with the goyim. And we get back into the same problem as we had with wine or with bishul akum. It brings the two people close together.
Same with liquor.